I'm here. It
Oh,
worked
hallelujah.
again.
It failed a couple of times first.
I
I don't know
know.
what's
I was
going on.
waiting. That's all
Thank you
right.
for waiting.
Fingers
Okay.
crossed it works good this time.
Fingers crossed.
Yep.
Okay. So, just to let anyone know, if they didn't see the first take, uh, Bek Ieremia, you are a psychic, you do psychic guidance readings,
Hmm.
and you do Reiki as well.
Yep.
And I know you do. I've come across you with you do these Facebook Live psychic readings where you do readings for people whoever you feel drawn to do
Hmm.
readings for, but everyone gets something out of it because everyone
Hmm.
gets some guidance from the cards. What kind of cards are they again? I'm not
I use oracle cards.
oracle cards. So
Yep. Yep. Angel
so
cards. Some people know them as.
so some people watching might know you from that. But it's been nice chatting to you lately and finding out a bit more about you. And I'd love for everyone to get to know you and I think it's a beautiful story actually about
Mm.
your journey, what you've been through, which is something that a lot of people don't talk about. So I think it's lovely that you're an open book with it, and we'll get to that. And how that has actually been a catalyst, I guess, for what you do now and how you want to help
Mm.
people.
Yep.
So, where's the best place to start to tell your story, do you think?
Oh, oh my God, that's a really good
That's a
question. I don't
big
know
question.
because, yeah, because I mean, there's so many different parts to it. There's so many different layers and parts to it. So it depends what area you want to start with, I guess.
Well, I guess as people would know from what the event's been called about miscarriages and anxiety and depression,
Yeah.
it probably would make sense to let people know that being a mother was something you always knew that
Mm.
was a definite for you.
Yeah,
Um, so, do you want to
it
tell us about
was.
that?
Yeah. It's so, being a mum was something I always wanted, which a lot of us do want, but I don't know, it was this really strong feeling that I had within me to really that was a big thing. I couldn't wait for that moment. I knew that was going to be a big part of who I was. I never understood why, but I knew that was going to be a big part of my journey. So when we started to have try for children, and that just didn't happen the way I expected, it was really heartbreaking. And it wasn't because we couldn't fall pregnant. I just could not stay pregnant, and we couldn't work out why that was happening. And so, because of my history with anxiety and depression, all of those, I guess, issues came to the surface again as I was going through that time. And it made it really, really difficult. I mean, that's a difficult, horrible thing to go through anyway. But I guess having to go through that and those really hard, challenging things to come up again and make it even harder was really difficult. So yeah, it meant I had to pretty much start my healing journey all over again, a few times over. Yeah,
So you have had to do it a few times. A few
yeah.
times, it goes back to even before that you knew that this would be an issue for you. It goes
Yeah.
back to you. You can go back and pinpoint that you had anxiety even before you met your husband and
Oh
all
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So you were going through a tough time then. I think I've heard you talk about that
Yeah, I mean,
before.
look, when I look back at it now, I can definitely see even as a child that I had issues with depression, um, not so much anxiety, but definitely depression, big time. And I can pinpoint that back to being a child. The times in my life where I actually felt depressed and knew that that was happening would have been around being a teenager and my early 20s. And then just before I met my now husband, I had a pretty bad breakdown, and yeah, it was that was the first time I was actually clinically diagnosed with depression. Went on medication and had some pretty intense therapy, and honestly did hardly left my house for like 3 months. I had a lot of people very worried about me. I quit my job. I pretty much quit life, to be honest with you. I really lost myself, and um, yeah, it was a really hard time in my life, but it was really strange that I met my life partner at the same time, because I would have thought that that was the worst time to meet someone. But I think in meeting him, he helped me heal as well, even though he didn't understand anything about it. He's never been exposed to depression or anxiety, whereas my family has been. So it was something that I was familiar with, but he hadn't. So it was very hard for him to understand it. But he's a very smiley, happy, easygoing person, and I think that was what I needed. He's never serious. He's just very easygoing, and I think I needed that kind of vibe in my life at that time. And so, yeah, it was very strange to meet him at that exact difficult moment. That was probably the most difficult time in my life, other than going through miscarriages. Yeah.
I think it's kind of amazing that someone
Mm.
sees you and sees the best in you when you're not at your best. I think that's quite incredible.
Yeah, I
You're
know. It
very
says a lot
fortunate in
about
that.
him. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it was, look, we had this instant connection. Like I said before, we met at a mutual friend's wedding. We were partnered up in the bridal party, and it was the running joke of the night and even leading up to it. You two will be the next ones getting married. We're going to make sure we set you up. And I was like, oh yeah, like this is not the time I want to be meeting someone. But he seemed like a nice guy. But the thing is, and I know it sounds really fairy tale-ish, but once we locked eyes, there was this almost, okay, like, okay, maybe there is something here on both sides. So yeah, it was quite interesting. Very interesting.
So, okay, so you always knew you wanted to be a mother, but your husband was a bit slower off the mark, but you got around to it.
I ended up convincing him, yeah. Yeah.
And so then what happened then? Tell us.
Yeah, so we got married, and the plan was get back from the honeymoon, start trying for kids straight away. It was something that at that time we both really wanted, me obviously a lot more than him. And I fell pregnant really quickly. I think within like 2 or 3 months I fell pregnant. I was like, I can't believe this has happened so easy, because my periods are all out of whack, and I have, polycystic ovaries. Oh my God, all these fears I had, like, what was I worried about? Because
You're
my
feeling
fear
so you
was, yeah,
you're
my fear
feeling so
was
lucky.
exactly, I did. I felt really fortunate, because my fear was always falling pregnant was going to be hard for me. And so I was like really thrown. I was like, wow, this is amazing. But unfortunately, around 9, 10 weeks, I had a miscarriage. So I started spotting. I knew straight away that I was not keeping this baby. I could feel that, and I obviously, like, I've been in touch with my intuition for a very, very long time. I could feel the baby from day dot. Like, I knew I was pregnant. My body felt different. Obviously, I couldn't feel it moving or anything, but I felt completely different. And yeah, so that was really heartbreaking, because it was like, it was so exciting, and then it was just ripped away from me, this lifelong dream that I had. Yeah, and that really threw me. And I was still, that was 5 years after I went through that really difficult time, went through that really difficult depression period of my life. But at that time, I was still healing from it. Like, now, I'm not triggered so much by things, but at that time, I was still at a stage where, if anything difficult happened in my life, it was very easy to have a day or two back in that state and feel like, oh my God, this is happening again. I really need to try and pull myself out of this again. Yeah, so it was really hard. And then I think about 6 months later, I fell pregnant again. No, it was a bit less than that, actually. So about 6 months later, I fell pregnant again. Was really excited because of what happened the first time they brought me in for an early scan. I was absolutely crapping myself. I was really nervous that something was going to go wrong, and my husband was so positive. He's like, it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. But when they did the scan, they said, look, I'm sorry, but there's nothing there. Like, your eggs fertilized and everything, but for some reason it didn't attach to the wall of your uterus, so it hasn't actually developed properly, and so you're technically not pregnant anymore. So blow number two. So that was absolutely horrendous. Yeah, it was
Mm.
really hard. Yeah, so that after that second one, that was really, really difficult. I started having a lot of anxiety, which I had not experienced so much before. I used to get panic attacks, but not so much anxiety. And my depression was really starting to come back. And I'm sure a lot of mothers, you know, even some who are watching, know what it feels like when you have a miscarriage, that no one just understands what you're going through. They can try and say as much as they can to comfort you, but it just doesn't do anything. And I really felt so alone in that time. And because of my depression, I was prone to, and still am, like I don't enjoy going for walks because I feel alone. I don't like that feeling, and that comes from being, when I had depression, I remember feeling so alone all of the time. So as much as I love my own space, I'm happy to sit in my, you know, office room at home and do my own thing for hours on end. But to go for a walk, for some reason, that really triggers a lot of memories for me. So that's not something I enjoy doing. Um, so yeah, after that second one, that was a really difficult time. I needed a bit of a break before we started again. And then the fears started to flood in. What if I never have my own children? What if this isn't going to happen to me? It was really, there was a massive cycle of negative thoughts happening. Um, yeah, it was very, very difficult. So I had a bit of a break before we tried again. And so we ended up trying again. Took longer to fall pregnant this time, but I did. I fell pregnant again, which was great. And the same thing happened about 10 weeks in. I found out that I had a miscarriage, and this one was actually quite horrendous. It's a very long story, probably too long for this interview, but yeah, it was a very difficult miscarriage in terms of the process, in terms of the baby leaving my body and all of that. It was quite traumatic. So yeah, that was quite horrendous, I would say. It's probably the only word to use for it.
Um,
Yeah.
I think you could tell us about it if you want to.
Yeah.
Do you want
Yeah.
to? Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't bother me. Yeah. So I think I had a scan, same thing. They realised there was no heartbeat. With the other two pregnancies, I had miscarried naturally. I allowed the babies to pass naturally, and they did so within a matter of days. So it wasn't too bad. It just felt like I had my period. So, you know, the doctor said, do you want to cure it or do you want to just pass it naturally? And I said, look, I'll just want to do it naturally again. But over the course of 2 weeks, my body was cramping and cramping and cramping, almost like now that I know I've experienced labour, like labour. And then nothing would happen, and then it would happen again. So that went for about 2 weeks. And I rang my doctor and I said, look, it's not happening. I think you better schedule me in for a curette. And it happened to be Melbourne Cup long weekend. So she said, look, I can, but it's...
Uh-oh.
So
Exposing.
anyway, yeah, we
No.
on
I
an
got
hour
you.
away. Oh, did I disappear again?
Froze for just a moment.
Oh, okay. We had driven an hour away to visit my dad for lunch, and on the way back, we were in the Domain Tunnel, and I started feeling the really bad cramps again. But this time they were lasting for a very long time, and I could feel something happening down there. And so I had a look down in my underwear because I could feel something wasn't right, and I was passing like blood clots, probably about that size, like huge blood clots. And I just started screaming because that just terrified me. That was just continuous. I thought I was dying. I honestly thought, oh my God, this is just it. We were nowhere near a hospital. We were like 40 minutes from home. So finally got to the hospital in excruciating pain, could not even walk because I had so much blood and stuff happening. They checked me, did an examination, said, look, pretty sure you've actually passed the baby, it's all good. So once my pain was gone and I was comfortable to go home, they allowed me to go home. But in the middle of the night, it started happening again. So I hadn't miscarried, it hadn't happened. So cut a long story short, they scanned me the next morning. Yep, baby was still there. So I ended up having to have a curette. So I went through that for about 2 days on and off, that really intense cramping. Yeah, so that was quite traumatic. That was really, really traumatic. So you could imagine why I actually gave myself, I think, about 5 or 6 months before we even tried to have a baby again after that. I mentally needed a break. But I actually needed to go and see a counsellor as well. So I actually needed therapy. I was not in a good state mentally. I really gave up all hope at that point. And I know other people out there have had way more miscarriages than that, but I think the traumatic way that they happened just really took its toll on me mentally. And yeah, I just was not in a good place at all.
it's certainly an emotional roller coaster, and you're creating life or hoping to, and then when it just doesn't happen, it's very
Yep.
devastating.
And we had a lot of very close people around us having kids at that time. A lot. Everybody was falling pregnant as it happens, and so we were constantly asked, "When are you going to have a baby? Why are you waiting so long? You shouldn't wait so long. You're not getting any younger." And I was too traumatized to speak about it openly. My close friends knew what was happening, but not everybody, and it wasn't something I wanted to share with everyone because it was too raw. I was too raw. Yeah, I couldn't, not in the headspace I was in.
No, I think people deal with it differently. Some people
Yeah.
talk about it, but a lot don't and can't, and it can be difficult.
Yeah.
And then you finally had Ava. So
Yes.
you finally were blessed. Not that happened smoothly.
No. No. I know.
So you finally got there, but not easily. So
No.
the actual birth for that, the birth with Ava was quite traumatic as well, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. So I was having a lot of anxiety throughout my pregnancy with Ava, obviously because of what had happened previously. I was just in a very negative mindset, still trying to deal with all of the things that had happened and process it. And so I asked my doctor to induce me because I could not wait any longer. I was full term. I think I was 39, just on 40 weeks, and I didn't want to go over. I was scared that if I went over, it wouldn't be good and something bad would happen. So he induced me and ended up breaking my waters at about 7 o'clock in the morning and put me on the oxytocin and said, look, labour will probably start within the next few hours. My body just went boom, 0 to 100 within like 5 seconds, and I started to have contractions pretty much straight away that I started laughing about initially because I was like, oh my God, it's already happening. And then the contraction ended and I was like, oh, I think I had a contraction. And then the next one started within like 30 seconds. And that's pretty much how my whole labour was. The contractions just didn't stop. It was like one long contraction. And that brought up a lot of fear because when that was happening, it just reminded me of having that last miscarriage. The pain was the same. So it scared the life out of me because I was really thrown at the intensity of it so quickly. I tried not to have any preconceived ideas about my labour because I knew it could happen any which way. But one thing I was not prepared for or had never heard of were contractions that continue to just happen back to back and without a break. So I was like, where's my break? Where do I have my mental break to even have some water or, something? So, I was on the gas. I asked for epidural because it was quite intense. We worked out that she was actually on my back. So my labour was back labour, which was why I was having such intense pain from all areas. And so when they gave me the epidural, finally, I don't know how long into it that was, but it felt like a very long time. My blood pressure completely dropped and they lost Ava's heartbeat. So they called an emergency. I remember opening my eyes and all of a sudden the room was like full of 20 people. I looked next to me, my husband was crying and I was like, okay. And my mum was being dragged out of the room. They're both quite strong people, so that really threw me. And I was like, what's happening? And they're like, nothing, it's fine. And I'm like, no, it's not. Anyway, so that whole schmozzle calmed down and then they told me what happened. So then they tried to give me the epidural again, which was fine the second time. And then after the contractions subsided and I was able to speak without being in pain, I started to tell the nurse that my throat was feeling funny and I didn't know what was happening. So they did a couple of tests on me, like by touching here and asking if I could feel this, can you feel this, can you feel this? And I'm like, no. So they realised that the epidural had actually travelled up too far and was starting to choke me because I couldn't feel my throat. So they had to take it out.
Oh my God.
I'm
glad
this is the short
out.
version too. This is the short version. So so by the time I was ready to have her, my contractions had come back full force again because the epidural had worn off by that stage. So they rushed me in for an emergency cesarean, gave me the spinal block or whatever it was to numb me, and it didn't take. For some reason I could still feel what was happening. So they ended up putting me under. So I was that moment was robbed from me when my daughter was born and I found out what I was having, because I didn't know what sex I was having, because I was asleep. I was put to sleep during that time. And so I remember opening my eyes, and the nurse was sitting next to me and said to me, your baby's been delivered. If you have a look at your husband, he's holding the baby, and look at the colour of her beanie or its beanie. And that's how I knew that I'd had a girl, because she was wearing pink. And that took me months to get over. Just that moment took me
Yeah.
absolutely months. Yeah.
I mean, you've
Yeah.
been waiting your whole life.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay. So through all of this, you have worked through. You've had counsellors and you've done different things, and you've worked and found your way back and a way to find peace. And I guess that's probably what you want to get to, and what you want to. That's why you're talking about it now, is because you
Yeah.
want to help other people.
Yeah.
So what do you think the best way is, or how would you recommend for people to claw their way back, or what do you teach, or how do you get through something like that?
Yeah. Look, it's hard to answer because everyone's so different, but I feel like what happens is we sit and think about it for too long, and we wait until things are too bad before we go and get help. And like after I had Ava, I started going through anxiety again, and I'm like, it's okay, it's just a normal mum thing. And I waited too long to go and get help. I should have known. Someone who'd been in that situation too many times already should have known, don't wait until it gets really bad, because then it's even harder to get over it. It takes so long to get there. If you feel like something is just not right, just go and the best place to start is go and see your GP. Like, that's the only thing you need to do. You don't need to have the answers. It's not up to you to have the answers or know what to do. Just go and see your GP and start from there if you don't know what to do, because there's so many options out there. And that's what I had done years and years ago, because I just didn't know what to do. But there's so many things out there. But, like I say, even to my clients, you don't have to wait until you are at crisis point to get help. You can go and get help just to feel good. Like, I could even, the way I'm feeling now is great. And I feel like my life is, definitely on the right track and everything. But if I get to a point in my life where I'm feeling quite overwhelmed, or I'm feeling like my anxiety is happening too often or something, there's nothing wrong with me going and seeing my psychologist for a one-off session. It doesn't have to be this ongoing thing, just to give me some strategies about how to cope with life at that point in time. But if you don't know what to do, you've got to just start somewhere. And that's something that I say a lot, even to myself, when I'm feeling overwhelmed or not knowing how to take on the next challenge, is you don't have to know how it's going to end up, or you don't have to have the answers, but you just have to make a start, take a step. And it doesn't matter if that step ends up being the wrong step, because in that step being wrong, it will point you towards the right direction anyway, because you'll be like, okay, that wasn't the right thing to do. I'm going to go and do this now. And that could be in terms of, I'm going to go and have acupuncture and see if that helps me. And you might think, no, that probably wasn't the right thing. I'm going to go and try Reiki now, or I might go and try, seeing a counsellor, depending on what the situation is. But I don't know. I think after having Ava and going through anxiety so bad, I remember just having this moment in my house. I think it was actually in this room, where I said to myself, this is bullshit. There's just so much more to life, and I cannot let myself be defined by these feelings anymore. I have to allow myself to live. This is not living. And that's why my mantra is live, not exist, because that's where it came from. And there's too many of us out there who are existing because we just get on with it. We just get on with it, and we get on with it, and we think that this is just life. Life is just meant to be like this. It's meant to be hard or challenging or struggling, and we're all time poor, and that's normal. But it's not normal. Like, we choose to fill our days with certain things, so we can choose not to fill our days with certain things. And so we have to say to ourselves, like, what do I want out of life? And what do I do to get it? Nothing's too hard. Like, nothing is too hard. If someone had said to me 2 years ago, I'd be sitting here talking about this now, I'd be like, nah, there's no way. I'm not even, coping day to day. Like, how is that going to be possible? And then if someone had said you're going to have your own business where you help people, I'd be like, nah, crap. There's no way. Like, that's been a lifelong dream. That's not who I am. I'm the person who doesn't follow their dreams. I'm the person who is constantly going through some sort of mental illness or issue. I can't inspire others. That's not who I am. So, but it was that moment that it was like something hit me and I was like, nah. And it was because I had her. It was in that moment that I realized, and I know this is quite spiritual, not everyone will understand this, but it was in that moment that I understood why those other 3 babies never came about. It was because her personality and the way she pushed me in positive ways now, pushed me to go through that anxiety so bad that it made me say to myself, this is the last time I'm putting myself in this situation. I have to work out why I keep coming here, why this keeps happening, and stop the cycle. And I worked really, really, really hard to make sure I got over it enough to be able to control it whenever I would start to feel it happening again.
That's reminding me. Reminding me, I think, as Oprah says something like, at first God or the universe or whatever word it was, first God throws a pebble, and if you don't get the message with that, it throws a like a brick or a sledge.
Yeah,
or a
exactly. So, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I think I better wrap it up, although I could talk to you for ages. But you like to help people, and that's your mission now. So if anyone wants to reach out to you, how could they contact you?
If you've tagged me in this video, haven't you, in this live? Yeah. Yep. So for those of you who can see it on Facebook, obviously, if you go to my personal page, you should be able to see the page that I'm on Facebook under, which is Bek Ieremia Healer and Life Guide. So I've got a Facebook profile and an Instagram account. But even if you send me a private message through my personal page, I can respond that way as well. But yeah, I think,
and I will be turning this into a podcast later. Yep. So if anyone listens to that, they can just look you up. Bek or Rebecca. Bek.
It's under
Rebecca. Rebecca.
Yeah, it's under Rebecca. The business page is under Bek Ieremia. Ieremia. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So people can find you that way. Is there anything you'd like to let people know before we finish up?
Yes, there's just so much more to life. You don't get your head stuck in this way of this is just how things are. Whatever it is that you want, just find a way to go for it. And your soul's purpose, your soul's calling, or whatever living means to you, it doesn't have to be this big thing. It doesn't have to be like, oh, my purpose is to write a book, or my purpose is to whatever. It doesn't have to be that. Your purpose could be, oh, my purpose is, or my way of living is to feel good every day and to make every day count. That's important enough. And you've got to just say to yourself, what is it that I can do that actually helps me achieve that? And if you don't know, ask someone. Just ask someone. Just start somewhere, because the ball gets rolling. Like, you start somewhere and it just snowballs. But if you don't tell the universe that that's what you want, the universe is just going to keep giving you what you're doing. So you've got to put it out there. You've got to ask for it, and just be open to receiving it as well, and just be mindful of what you're saying and what you're putting out there, because the more you say I can't do that, the universe is going to say, okay, well, you're saying you can't, so that's what we give you. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
That's all right. Thank you.
And thank you. And you've been getting some beautiful messages too, so you can go back and have a look at the comments if you didn't see them.
Oh, lovely.
Yes,
no,
I
can't.
Very supportive messages.
Oh.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time.
All right. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.